I'm going to walk through this review with the same calm, practical lens I use when I'm actually deciding whether to spend money on a piece of gear. If you're on the fence about a thermal camera and you're trying to figure out whether it will fit into the kind of work you do, the goal here is to give you a clear sense of the real-world value, not just a list of specs. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. Thermal imaging tools have a reputation for being either niche gadgets that sit on a shelf or expensive professional rigs that require a steep learning curve. That's the tension you feel when you first see a device like the BOSCH Pro GTC600C. On one hand, it promises a 12-volt battery system, Wi-Fi connectivity, and a library of up to 500 sharp images, which sounds like a lot of convenience. On the other hand, you're probably wondering, will the interface actually be intuitive enough for me to grab a quick reading on a job site? Or will I be stuck navigating menus while the problem I'm trying to solve is still there? Will the battery hold up through a full day of inspections? Or will I be swapping cells every couple of hours? Those are the practical concerns that matter once the box is opened. First, let's talk about who this camera is built for. If you're a seasoned HVAC technician, an electrician who needs to spot hidden hot spots behind walls, or a building inspector who routinely checks for moisture and insulation gaps, the GTC600C lines up nicely with those daily tasks. The measuring range of -4F to 1112F, 20C to +600C, covers everything from cold chain monitoring to high-temperature industrial equipment, so you won't be hitting a ceiling in most field scenarios. For hobbyists who enjoy exploring thermal photography as a creative outlet, the device is still approachable, but you'll find that the workflow leans more toward documentation than artistic experimentation. In short, it's a work-oriented tool that can double as a casual plaything, but it's not a dedicated art camera platform with interchangeable lenses or extensive post-processing controls. Ease of use is where BOSCH really tries to differentiate itself. The interface is organized around a small touchscreen that defaults to a live view with temperature overlay, and the menu depth is limited to just a handful of taps for the most common actions: capture, annotate, and send. I tested the camera by stepping into a dimly lit attic to locate a missing insulation break. After powering it up, the device automatically focused on the thermal contrast, and I could see the hot spot within 2 seconds. The autofocus isn't a high-precision laser system, but for the distances and temperature differentials typical in building diagnostics, it's more than reliable. The on-screen menu didn't feel like a labyrinth. Each selection is clearly labeled, and the Quick Capture button lets you save an image without pausing the live feed, which is a small but significant time saver when you're moving between tight spaces. Low-light performance is a point that can be confusing with thermal cameras because they don't rely on visible light in the same way a regular camera does. What matters here is how the sensor handles low-contrast temperature differences. In a test with a cold pipe against a warm wall, the GTC600C displayed a clear gradient even though the ambient light was practically non-existent. The image quality stayed sharp, and the temperature readouts were stable, which tells me the sensor is well-tuned for subtle thermal variations. If you're planning to use this outdoors at night for electrical inspections, you'll get the same level of fidelity as you would in daylight. Stabilization is another practical factor. The camera's form factor is compact enough to hold comfortably with one hand, and the built-in gyroscopic sensor helps dampen handshake when you're scanning a large surface. I didn't notice any jitter that would blur the temperature overlay during a slow pan across a wall, which is helpful when you're trying to keep the image readable for a client who might be watching on your phone. However, there is no mechanical image stabilization, so if you need rock-steady footage for a detailed video analysis, you'll want to mount it on a tripod or a dedicated gimbal. Battery life is often the silent deal-breaker for field gear, and Bosch's 12-volt max system is designed to be interchangeable, meaning you can swap in a fresh pack without waiting for a charge. In my day-long test, running continuous live view with occasional captures, the battery lasted roughly 9 hours before dropping below the low battery warning. That aligns with the claim of long-lasting power. And because the battery is a standard 12V pack, you can carry spares that are already common in many toolboxes. The downside is that you can't charge the battery while you're using the camera, so you need to plan for swaps if you anticipate more than a half day of continuous operation. Connectivity is where the smart part of this camera comes in. Through Wi-Fi, The device talks to BOSCH's ThermalOn app, which lets you stream the live thermal feed too.